This particular video is going to be about Francis Scott Key. And there are some key, yes, there's a pun intended here, there are some key details that I think every one of you should know about Francis Scott Key. In 1779, now mind you, if you guys can think of any way to remember some of the details of this particular story, go ahead and leave them down here in the comments below. I'd love to see how you're going to remember all these details, but go ahead. Okay, in 1779, Francis Scott Key was born in Frederick County, Maryland. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, he was born on an estate called Terra Rubra. And if I mispronounce anything in this particular video, I humbly apologize. Okay? After he became an adult, he studied law. Then he and his wife moved to Georgetown, that's in the District of Columbia now, and started a law practice. Georgetown is an actual neighborhood these days in the District of Columbia. Go check that out for yourself. I may have gotten that date wrong. Looks like I got that date wrong. It wasn't in 1779, okay? You caught me in a mistake. I'm sorry. Francis Scott Key was not born in 1779. I've got a typo right here. I'm sorry. My apologies. If you want to leave the correct date, go ahead and leave it down here in the comments below. Thank you very much. I caught it myself, but thank you. Okay? So in 1776, the people of Baltimore, Maryland built Fort McHenry to protect themselves from the British. It was originally called Fort Whetstone, but the name was changed in honor of James McHenry. You can read more about James McHenry because I have some hyperlinks down here in the description below. You can read all that for yourself. So, if you want to know about James McHenry, or you want to know about Fort McHenry itself, you can read the stories that I've left in the comments, not in the comments section, but in the descriptions. Well, the description, okay? I have a description box, has hyperlinks in it. Read it for yourself. Okay. In September 1814, Francis Scott Key was trying to negotiate the release of Dr. William Beanes from the invading British. Mr. Key and Mr. Beanes were close friends. Initially, Mr. Key was successful. Okay. Initially, Mr. Key was successful in his negotiations, but Mr. Key and his friend learned of the impending attack on Baltimore by the British. So the British allowed Mr. Key and his friend to return to their boat. But the British guarded their boat until the attack on Fort McHenry was over. You can read more about that in the hyperlinks that I've left in the description below. Okay. Now, the song entitled The Star-Spangled Banner started out as a poem, but Francis Scott Key intended it to be he intended it to become a song. I'm sorry, I do stutter and I do stammer sometimes, bear with me. Mr. Key's brother-in-law distributed Mr. Key's poem. The poem was published in the Baltimore Patriot newspaper. What does this mean? Well, I'll tell you exactly what it means. Yes, Francis Scott Key was a patriot, but he was also a capitalist. That meant that he sold this poem to the Baltimore Patriot newspaper, and he obtained revenue from it. Okay? Yes, it was also passed out on handbills, but it was also published. That means Francis Scott Key got money for this poem/song. That's exactly what it means. He was making money off this thing. Okay. So what does the song actually say? It discusses the word ramparts. What are ramparts? Think about a medieval castle. Okay, let's say that again. Think about a medieval castle. The wall surrounding the castle would be the rampart. So what was the flag doing over the Fort McHenry wall? It was swaying in the breeze. Okay? So the wall around Fort McHenry was exactly the same type of wall that would have been placed around a medieval castle. Okay. So what rockets were fired at Fort McHenry during the attack? Well, I have a hyperlink to an article about that in the description below. You can see that for yourself. And yes, I do have more notes. As if you didn't know. Whoops. Okay. The words towering steep refers to the fact that Fort McHenry was built on a hill, and yet the flag was still flying over both the hill and the walls of the fort. A hireling is a person who obtains low-paying work. He doesn't possess ambition. Sometimes this term was used to refer to mercenaries. The British Army was authorized at that time to find hirelings who are willing to do what we would call, well, basically dirty work. Okay? So when did the Star-Spangled Banner become our national anthem? In 1916, President Woodrow Wilson signed an executive order that made the Star-Spangled Banner the national anthem for all military ceremonies. But the song would not become the official national anthem until Congress voted on it in 1931. You can read articles about that right down here in the description below. But here's the interesting part. What political party did Woodrow Wilson belong to? That's right, it was the Democrat Party. Basically, it was the same Democrat Party, and some of the members in that party right now want that song no longer to be the national anthem. That's interesting. They were the ones who made it the national anthem, and now they don't want it anymore? Interesting. All right. So, anyway, let me take a look here, make sure I've got all my notes. Yep. That was that. Okay. I will tell you more in a future video, so I would like for you to stay tuned.